I died once before. It wasn't like in the movies. There was no tunnel of light, no life flashing before my eyes. It was on a rainy Tuesday, stuck in traffic, with some random song playing on the radio. I was thinking about the grocery list, the bill that was due tomorrow, normal things, you know, the kind of worries that fill 99% of our days. Then, a flash. Headlights coming head-on, so fast my brain didn't even register the danger. I only remember the sound of metal bending like paper. And then, silence. A heavy, absolute silence. I felt no pain. Nothing. The first thing I felt was a strange lightness, as if someone had cut the ropes that tied me to the ground. I saw myself floating, looking down. There was the scene. My destroyed car, the ambulance lights beginning to arrive, flashing soundlessly, and my body, there, thrown on the asphalt. The strangest part? I felt no fear. I felt peace, an acceptance I had never experienced in life. I understood that it was over, that this was the end of my story. But I was wrong, completely wrong, because what happened next, in that place between life and death, was the most real thing that had ever happened to me, and it changed everything. Would you believe me if I told you I received a mission? And what if I told you it wasn't anything I expected? Leave in the comments what you think happened next. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you the first thing I heard when I thought all was lost. Before I tell you about that mission, you need to understand who I was. Because, to be honest, if someone had talked to me about life missions back then, I probably would have given a little laugh and changed the subject. I was practical, skeptical, the kind of person who lives with her feet firmly planted on the ground. Or at least, I thought I did. On the outside, my life looked like one of those margarine commercials. I was 32, had a good job at an advertising agency, a rented apartment I had decorated myself, and a boyfriend everyone thought was perfect. My first name was Success. My last name was Productivity. My schedule was organized to the millimeter. Meeting at 9 a.m., gym at 6 p.m., dinner with Ricardo at 8 p.m. Everything fit together. Everything worked like clockwork. But what no one saw was what happened when the clock stopped. The truth is, I lived on autopilot. I would wake up to the shrill sound of the alarm clock and already feel tired, you know? A tiredness of the soul. I would drink my coffee, tasting obligation, not pleasure. I would drive to work stuck in traffic, looking at other drivers and thinking we were all just following a script we didn't write. I would smile in meetings, but inside I was counting the seconds until they ended. My relationships were like that too, superficial. I would call my mom every Sunday, but while she told me about her plants, I was answering work emails on mute. "I love you, Mom," I would say at the end, but the words came out hollow, mechanical. With Ricardo, we seemed more like roommates than a couple. We would watch series in silence, each on our own phone. Where had the connection gone? When did we stop really looking at each other? Every night, I would lie in bed, look at the dark ceiling, and feel a hole in my chest. An emptiness that neither the next raise, nor the next trip, nor the next "I love you" from Ricardo could fill. I had everything society says we need to be happy, so why did I feel so unhappy? So, absent from my own life? I thought the problem was me, that I was ungrateful, that I didn't know how to value things. Little did I know the answer wasn't in having more, but in being more. And it was in this state, in this cold emptiness, that I got in the car that rainy Tuesday, thinking about the grocery list. I was so focused on what was missing from my pantry that I didn't notice what was really missing from my life. But what I didn't know was that day wasn't just any day. It was the day the universe decided to give me a shock, literally. Have you ever felt like this? Living on autopilot, as if you were a spectator of your own story? Tell me in the comments. In the next video, I'll finally reveal the first words I heard in that place between life and death, and why they scared me more than the very idea of having died. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss it, because that part changes everything. Now, looking back, I see the signs were all there, like little red flags planted along my day, and I, blinded by my routine, walked past all of them without even looking. It all started that morning. I was making my coffee in that usual rush when my favorite mug, the one with the cheesy phrase, "Carpe diem," simply slipped from my hand. I didn't even bump into it. It was as if it had jumped off the counter. The sound of ceramic breaking on the kitchen floor was sharp, violent. For a second, the noise cut through the autopilot of my mind. I looked at the scattered pieces, the coffee mixing with the dust. I felt a strange pang in my chest, a discomfort. But then I looked at the clock, saw I was late, and swept everything under the rug. Literally and metaphorically. The second sign came at work. I had an important presentation, one of those that could earn me a promotion. I had rehearsed for weeks. Everything was perfect on my computer. But at the crucial moment, in front of the entire board, the file got corrupted. It opened to a screen full of codes and meaningless symbols. My boss looked at me with that disappointed face I knew so well. I felt my face burn, cold sweat running down my back. I managed to improvise, of course. I always found a way. But that feeling that something was fundamentally out of place, it never left me. But what happened next was even worse. When it was time to leave, the building's elevator stopped between 2 floors. Just me and metallic silence. The emergency lights came on, painting my face with a yellowish, sickly light. I was stuck there for about 10 minutes that felt like 10 years. And it was in that suspended cubicle that I felt it for the first time. It wasn't just discomfort. It was fear. A cold, irrational fear. I grabbed my phone to call Ricardo, to hear his voice, but I gave up. What was I going to say? I have a bad feeling? He would laugh, say it was stress from the presentation. And maybe it was. When I finally left the building, the rain had started. Heavy, thick. The sky was lead-colored. It looked like it was going to collapse on the city. And I got in the car, tired, frustrated, ignoring the broken mug, the corrupted file, the stopped elevator, and, especially, that knot in my stomach that was screaming for me to go home. I just wanted to buy the things on the grocery list and forget that day. Little did I know that the universe, when we don't listen to whispers, has no choice but to shout. And its shout was coming my way, in the form of a pair of headlights in the wrong lane. Do you believe in signs? Have you ever had a day when everything seemed to go wrong, like a warning? Tell me in the comments. And get ready, because in the next video, I'll finally tell you the first words I heard in that silence after the crash, and the voice that spoke to me wasn't from anyone you could imagine. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because this revelation is the beginning of everything. I turned on the radio, trying to drown out the sound of the rain and my own thoughts. Some random pop song started playing, one of those that get stuck in your head. The drops hit the windshield hard, and the wipers fought in a frantic and almost useless rhythm to give me some vision of the world outside. The asphalt gleamed, turning the lights of other cars into colored blurs. My mind was racing, but not with important things. It was milk, sandwich bread, laundry detergent, the grocery list spinning in a loop in my head, as if it were the most urgent thing in the universe. That's when I saw them. 2 points of light, growing in the dark, coming straight at me. At first, my brain didn't understand. They looked like fallen stars, out of place. But they grew too fast. They were headlights. In my lane. Coming at me. Time, it stretched, became rubber. In that thousandth of a second that seemed like an eternity, 1,000 absurd thoughts went through me. A car in the wrong lane? In my lane? My hands gripped the steering wheel with a force I didn't know I had. My feet hit the brakes with such violence I felt my heel bone protest. I saw the other driver's face, a blur of panic under the rain's light. And my last thought, the last conscious thought I had in that life, wasn't about Ricardo or my mother or some great regret. It was the most stupid and human thing possible. I'm not going to be able to buy the milk. The sound wasn't an explosion, like in movies. It was a scream. A sharp and deafening scream of metal tearing, of glass shattering into a million pieces. I felt a violent jolt, crushing pressure on my chest, as if the entire world had decided to collapse on top of me. And then, nothing. Silence. A silence that was more than the absence of sound. It was a heavy, velvety silence that filled everything. The pain disappeared. The pressure disappeared. The fear disappeared. The first thing I noticed was the absence of weight. I was no longer inside my body. I was above, floating gently, like a feather in the breeze. Down below, the scene was chaotic. My car, or what was left of it, was a pile of twisted metal, smoking under the rain that wouldn't stop. The ambulance lights were already arriving, flashing in a silent ballet of red and blue. And I saw myself, lying on the wet asphalt, with my face turned to the dark sky, in a strange, broken position. Quiet. So quiet. And the craziest thing of all? I felt no panic. I felt no sadness. I felt relief. A deep relief. As if I had carried a weight on my back my whole life. And finally, someone had taken it off me. I looked at that body that had been mine, at that life that had been mine, and felt a peace I had never known while breathing. I thought it was the end, the period, but it was just a comma, the beginning of a conversation I would never in a million years have expected to have. Have you ever stopped to think what your last thought would be in a moment like that? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. I floated there, in that rainy silence, and saw everything with a clarity I had never had in life. The paramedic kneeling beside my body, the expression of a tired police officer, writing things on a wet clipboard, the driver of the other car sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt sorry for him. I saw his life script changing forever in that instant. And gradually, the scene began to fade. Like an old photograph dipped in water, the edges began to blur. The sound of sirens, which before was silent, now seemed to come from very, very far away, until it disappeared completely. The flashing lights lost their brightness, turning into opaque stains. The rain stopped falling. The world, my world, was shutting down. Suddenly, I was in darkness. But it wasn't a scary, empty dark. It was the opposite. It was a full dark, full of peace, of silence. It was like being in the safest place in the universe, a place where there was no rush, no bills to pay, no other people's opinions. For the first time in my life, my mind was quiet. The hole in my chest, that emptiness that had accompanied me for so many years, had finally been filled. I was nothing, and at the same time, I was everything. I was home. That's when I saw it. Far away, a tiny point of light. It looked like a lonely star, but it wasn't still. It pulsed gently, with a golden color, warm, like sunlight at the end of the afternoon, and it called to me. I can't explain how. It wasn't a sound. It was a magnet, a certainty that I needed to go there. I had no body, no legs, but I moved toward it. Or maybe it moved toward me. As I approached, the light grew, enveloping me. And with it came a feeling. My God, what a feeling. It was love. But not this love we know. The love that demands, that expects something in return. It was pure, absolute love. It was like being truly seen. Every flaw, every mistake, every dark secret. And being loved not despite that, but because of that. All the anxiety, all the guilt, all the feeling of not being good enough that I had carried my whole life, simply melted away. I cried without having eyes, a cry of relief, of someone who finally understands the meaning of everything. I thought that was it, that I was going to dissolve into that light, become part of that love forever, and I wanted that more than anything. But what happened next was even more unbelievable. Right in the center of that infinite peace, a consciousness spoke to me. Not with a voice, not with words that we hear. It was a thought that was born inside me, but that wasn't mine. It was an ancient, gentle, and powerful wisdom. And the first thing that presence said to me, with a clarity that shook everything I thought I had understood, was, "Not yet." Have you ever imagined what it would be like to hear a voice in absolute silence? What do you think it meant by, "not yet"? Leave it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell because the dialogue that followed was the reason I'm here, telling you this story today. Not yet. Those two words echoed in my being, not as a sound, but as an absolute truth that settled in the center of my soul. Confusion was the first thing I felt after all that peace. What do you mean? Not yet. I had seen my broken body on the asphalt. I had accepted the end. What place was this, anyway? The golden light around me pulsed, as if responding to my silent question. It intensified, and the environment, which before was just a warm light, gained texture. I can't explain it properly. Imagine diving into the late afternoon sun, a sun that doesn't burn, but that embraces you. Particles of light, like gold dust, danced slowly around me. There was no floor, no ceiling, no walls. Only that infinite space of pure love existed. And then, I began to see. It wasn't like a movie playing. It was like living again, but from the outside. I saw myself as a child, falling off my bike and scraping my knee. But this time, I didn't just feel my pain. I felt the worry on my mother's face, a tightness in her heart that, at the time, I hadn't even noticed. I saw myself in college, ignoring a classmate who was crying quietly in the corner of the library. I was in a hurry. I had a test to study for. But now I felt her loneliness. A loneliness so deep it hurt me. Here, in this place without a body, scene after scene. The day I didn't answer my father's call because I was in an important meeting. He just wanted to say he missed me. I felt the pang of rejection he felt. The waiter I treated impatiently because my order took too long. I felt his fatigue, the hours standing, the humiliation of being treated as invisible. It wasn't a judgment. No one was pointing a finger at me. On the contrary, it was as if this consciousness, this loving presence, was lending me its eyes so I could, for the first time, see what really mattered. All my successes, the promotions, the apartment, the compliments, seemed like dust, colorless, weightless. And the moments that shone, those were different. They were the small gestures. A smile I gave to an elderly woman on the street. A tight hug I gave my friend after she ended a relationship. These were the only moments that had substance. But why? I asked without a voice. Why do I have to go back? The answer came like a wave of warmth, filling every void. You haven't fulfilled your mission yet. My human mind, even there, ran to the obvious. Mission? I imagined grandiose things. Curing a disease, writing a book that would change the world, leading a nation. I wasn't any of that. I was just an advertising executive who worried about grocery lists. The present seemed to smile. A sensation of tenderness enveloped me, correcting my thought with a simplicity that completely dismantled me. Your mission isn't to move mountains, the wisdom flowed into me. It's to teach someone to take the first step. Your mission is to be the light on someone's cloudy day. The golden particles around me formed new images. A hand holding an elderly person's hand. Someone stopping what they were doing to listen to a friend vent. A genuine smile exchanged with a stranger at the store checkout. Your mission, the voice continued, each word becoming part of me, is to forgive those who hurt you, not for them, but to free yourself. It's to make someone, just one person, feel seen. Go back and fulfill the mission of small gestures. That was the first revelation. My great and heroic life mission was to be kind. It was to pay attention. It was to connect. Everything I had failed to do. I cried again, not from sadness, but from overwhelming understanding. The hole in my chest would never be filled with more success or more things. It could only be filled with people, with love given and received in the details. Then came the border. The light in front of me became even brighter, more inviting. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I took one more step, I would dissolve into it forever. I would stay in that peace, in that unconditional love. Behind me, I felt the cold darkness of the world, the pain, the chaos, the traffic, the bills, life. And that was the second revelation, perhaps the most shocking. No one was sending me back. The choice was mine. Stay there, in perfection, or go back to the mess, to the cold, to the pain, but also to the chance to give a smile that could save someone's day. to the chance to hold my mother's hand and really feel her touch, to the chance to look into Ricardo's eyes and really ask how he was doing. And for the first time, I understood the value of a heartbeat. What would you do in my place? Would you choose eternal peace, or would you go back to the pain and beauty of life, knowing what you know now? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because the way I returned to my body was more violent and frightening than the accident itself. Before me, the light, eternal peace, the promise of endless love, without pain, without bills to pay. It was paradise, exactly as we imagine it, only 1,000 times better. I could simply take a step and dissolve into it, forget who I was, forget the pain, the fatigue, the emptiness. Stay. It was so tempting. Behind me, I felt the cold vacuum of the world I had left, the memory of rain, of twisted metal, the memory of pain, not just from the accident, but the pain of that life on autopilot, the weight of my own absence. Going back meant returning to all of that, to the mess, to the bills, to the broken relationships, to the body that, I knew, would be in pieces. Stay, or go back. The choice was mine. And that's when the image of my mother came to mind. Not the mother I talked to on the phone while answering emails, but my real mother with her hands full of dirt from the garden and the smell of cake on her apron. I remembered Ricardo, not the guy who watched series beside me in silence, but the Ricardo from our first date, with eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. I saw the face of every person I could have helped with a simple gesture, a smile, a minute of attention. The mission of small gestures. They didn't need me to move mountains. They just needed me to be present. And with a clarity that hurt, I understood. The peace I felt here, in this place of light, wasn't a reward. It was a reminder. It was the feeling I should have sought down there, in the midst of chaos. I made my decision. Without words, I turned my back on the light and faced the darkness. I'm going back. My entire being communicated. The presence enveloped me one last time, not to hold me back, but like a farewell embrace. And it gave me one last instruction, the third and most important revelation of all. The love you felt here isn't only on this side, it told me. It's in the good morning you forgot to give, in the patience you didn't have, in the forgiveness you didn't release. The pain will be great. Don't forget why you're going back. And then, the process began. It wasn't gentle like the coming. It was the opposite. It was as if an invisible hook had caught my soul and pulled me back with absurd violence. The peace shattered like glass. The silence was replaced by a deafening noise, a vortex sucking me down faster and faster. I was falling back into reality, and the fall was terrifying. The first impact was the cold. A morgue refrigerator cold that entered through my bones. And right after, the pain. My God, the pain. It was as if an anvil were on top of my chest, crushing me. Every part of my body screamed. I tried to breathe, and it was like swallowing glass shards. The air tore through my lungs, cold air, smelling of antiseptic. I opened my eyes. A white ceiling, stained, out of focus. A sharp and insistent beep. Coming from somewhere to my right, the weight of my own arms, my legs. I was back, trapped, back in the cage of flesh and bone. And the first thing I felt, mixed with the piercing pain, was a gratitude so overwhelming that tears began to roll down the corners of my eyes. Each stab of pain was a cry that said, "You're alive." Each beep of that machine was the most beautiful song I had ever heard. But waking up was just the beginning. The real challenge was living again. How was I going to explain all this to the people I loved? How was I going to live the mission of small gestures in a world that only values great achievements? What would you do if you woke up with a second chance and a mission that no one else in the world could understand? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the first conversation I had after coming back from the dead. And the reaction shocked even me. The first sound I truly heard was my mother's voice. Not her voice, but the sound of her crying. A low, contained cry. as if she were afraid of waking me up. I kept my eyes closed for a moment, just feeling the rough hospital sheet on my skin, the smell of alcohol and sadness in the air, and the pain, a dull and deep pain in every inch of my body, reminding me that I was, in fact, back. When I finally opened my eyes, the room's light was white and cruel. My mother was in an armchair in the corner with her face in her hands. Ricardo was standing beside the bed looking out the window. He looked older, more tired. When he noticed I was awake, his eyes widened. He didn't smile. He just looked, scared. "She's awake?" he said, and his voice came out hoarse. My mother lifted her head with a start, and the relief on her face was the most beautiful and painful thing I had ever seen. They hugged me, carefully, as if I were made of glass. They talked about doctors, about broken bones, about how lucky I was. They used the word miracle all the time. Little did they know how close to the truth that word was. But what no one saw was the distance that had settled inside me. While my mother told me, crying, how she had prayed for me, I wasn't just hearing her words. I was seeing her pain, the line of fatigue around her eyes, the way her hands trembled holding mine. And Ricardo? I looked at him and saw a wall, a transparent barrier between us. He was there, physically, but his soul seemed to be miles away. What had happened while I was gone? The days in the hospital were the longest of my life. The physical pain was terrible, but the pain of the soul was worse. It was the pain of having a secret the size of the universe and not being able to tell anyone. How could I explain to my skeptical boyfriend and my religious mother that I had died and received a mission to be kind? They would commit me to the psychiatric ward. So I smiled, did physical therapy, ate the tasteless Jell-O, and agreed with everything. But inside, I was screaming. The first time I tried to fulfill my mission was a disaster. A nurse came into the room with an exhausted face to change my IV. The old me would have ignored her, playing with my phone. The new me looked at her, really looked. I saw the deep dark circles, the wedding ring that seemed tight on her swollen finger. I smiled and said, "Thank you. Really? You look like you're having a difficult day." She stopped, looked at me as if I were a strange animal, gave a forced little smile and said, "It's my job," and left. I felt a pang of failure. The mission of small gestures was harder than it seemed, but what happened next was even worse. One night, when my mother had already gone home, Ricardo was sitting in the armchair, on his phone. The silence was heavy. I gathered all my courage and said, "Ricardo, we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, and the expression on his face was cold, a coldness I had never seen. "I know," he said, and his voice had no emotion. "I saw the messages on your phone, on the day of the accident." My heart, which had just learned to beat again, stopped. What messages? My phone had been destroyed in the crash. What was he talking about? Panic began to rise up my throat, cold and bitter. That accident hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning of something much more complicated. Have you ever kept a secret so big you felt it would suffocate you? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because in the next video I'm going to tell you what those messages were. And the truth behind them was a stab that hurt more than any broken bone. Messages? What messages? My voice came out as a scratchy whisper. The beep of the machine beside me seemed to scream in the silence that formed. Ricardo didn't look at me. He took his own phone, opened a conversation, and turned the screen toward me. And I saw. They were screenshots. Messages from me, from my number, to my boss, Marcelo. They were from the day of the accident, minutes before I left the office. "Marcelo, about the director position, I'm in. I know the project was Anna's, but I know how to present it as if it were mine. She won't even know what hit her." And there was another. "You can count on me. I'll do whatever it takes to move up. We can celebrate later." I looked at those words on the screen and didn't recognize the person who had written them. I mean, I knew it was me. I remembered the blind ambition, the knife I was preparing to stab in the back of my colleague Anna, a girl full of talent who trusted me. That was the autopilot me. The me who would do anything for one more rung on the corporate ladder, for one more zero in the bank account. The me who was willing to empty my soul even more in exchange for a position with a nice title. And the truth was ugly, humiliating. Ricardo hadn't found evidence of a romantic betrayal. He had found something worse. He had found irrefutable proof of my emptiness. The old me would have denied it, would have made up an excuse, manipulated the situation, turned the tables. But I wasn't her anymore. I lowered my eyes. The tears that came weren't from sadness about the end of my relationship. They were tears of mourning. Mourning for that person I had been. "It's true," I said, and honesty weighed in the air like a stone. That's what I was going to do. That's the person I was. Ricardo looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something beyond coldness. I saw disappointment and pity. He expected a fight, an argument. He didn't expect a confession. He didn't know what to do with my surrender. He put away his phone, adjusted his jacket, and said the phrase that sealed the end of my old life. "I don't know who you are anymore. And, to be honest, I don't think you know either." He left the room without looking back. And in the silence he left, I didn't feel despair. I felt freedom. The last anchor that tied me to that life of appearances had just been cut. Leaving the hospital was like being born again, but into a world I no longer recognized. The gray of the city, the noise of cars, the rush of people brushing my shoulders. Everything seemed strange, like a movie in a language I didn't speak. My old life was an expensive, tight suit, and now that I had taken it off, I didn't know how to walk without it. The first thing I did was quit my job. I called Marcelo and just said, "I'm not coming back." He tried to argue, talked about the promotion. I hung up. Then I called Anna and told her everything. I asked for forgiveness. There was silence on the other end of the line, and then quiet crying. "I can't believe you were going to do that," she said. "Neither can I replied. I moved out of the apartment I shared with Ricardo and went to a tiny place with secondhand furniture. I sold the new car I had bought with my last bonus and started taking the bus. On the outside, it seemed like my life had collapsed. A total failure. But inside, for the first time, the hole in my chest was beginning to heal, and I began my mission. Without fanfare, without an audience, I began to pay attention. I held the elevator door for my elderly neighbor and waited for her to enter, without rushing. I truly asked, "How are you?" to the girl at the supermarket checkout, and waited for the answer, looking into her eyes. I started calling my mother not on speakerphone anymore, but sitting on the couch, doing nothing else, just listening about her plants, about the bird that had made a nest on the window. Each small gesture was like lighting a candle in the dark. Small, almost insignificant, but making all the difference for those in darkness. I wasn't healing the world. I was healing myself, one kindness at a time. The emptiness was being filled, not with success or applause, but with the real texture of life, with connection, with the love I learned wasn't on the other side, but hidden here, in the details my rush had never let me see. Today, my schedule no longer has important meetings, but it's full of long coffees with friends, visits to my mother, hours of volunteer work at an animal shelter. I no longer have a last name of productivity, but for the first time in my life, I feel I have a purpose. And if your life changed completely today, what would be the first small thing you would do differently to start living your true purpose? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because in the next video, I'm going to share the story of a person I met on this new journey. A story that proves that sometimes a simple "good morning" can literally save a life. And it's funny to think, I had to die to finally learn how to live. I spent my whole life building a sandcastle, you know? The promotions, the compliments, the perfect apartment, the showcase boyfriend, and all it took was one wave, one flash of headlights in the wrong lane, to wash it all away and show me I was building in the wrong place, on wet sand. What remained weren't the titles or the money in the account. What remained, what really has weight, are the connections. The warmth of my mother's hand in mine, the sound of a friend's laughter, the look of gratitude from a stranger you helped. We live in a crazy race for big things, for heroic deeds, For success, we can show others. But what if we're looking in the wrong place? That presence, that light, it didn't ask me to heal the world. It asked me to make one person's day a little better. And what I discovered in this new life of mine is that when you do that, when you give yourself in these small gestures, the hole in your chest, it disappears. That emptiness that haunted me every night was being filled, piece by piece, with every smile I caused, with every tear I helped dry. Today, I understand. The great mission of our life isn't in a great act that will make headlines. It hides in the details. In the good morning you give with feeling. In the patience you have with someone who's learning. In the forgiveness you release, not for the other person, but for yourself. The love I felt on the other side isn't a prize for the end of life. It's the energy that's available to us here, now, hidden in the simplest things. I don't know what your story is, what your battles are, or how big the emptiness you sometimes feel is. But I ask you, what if your great mission, the one you're looking for so much, is also hidden in the small things you're going to do today? Tell me in the comments what you think about this. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because my mission now is to share these stories.